Shop Talk Live, episode number 240. Today, I am honored to bring you an episode with Greenwoodworker, carver extraordinaire, Dave Fisher. Dave's work transcends what you think you can do with an axe, an adze, and a log. If you're not familiar with his work, check it out. His piece is on the back cover of the newest issue, Fine Woodworking 289. But he has done many things with fine woodworking in the past, not the least of which is a 8-hour-long video workshop where he takes you from log to finished carved bowl in the Greenwood working tradition. It is one of those series that people tell me time and time again is worth the price of a Fine Woodworking Unlimited membership alone. If you're not a Fine Woodworking Unlimited member, head on over to finewoodworking.com/unlimited and come on, join in on the fun. Hours and hours and hours of super in-depth video content awaits you. Not to mention, it comes with a subscription to a little thing called Fine Woodworking Magazine, which is pretty cool too. All right, on with the show after a word from our sponsors. This episode is sponsored by Maverick Abrasives. Maverick is a family-run company that's been making sanding belts and discs for woodworkers in the USA for 30 years. With Maverick, you're buying factory direct, so you're likely to save a lot of money. I just looked around my shop at the various abrasives that I use, and I did the math. If I bought everything directly from Maverick, I would save around 40% on my sanding discs and belts. Maverick has all of the popular size belts and discs in stock on their website, but they can also make any custom sizes that you might need. Check out their website at maverickabrasives.com or give one of their owners, Garrett, a call at 714-646-3299 and use the code FINEWOODWORKING. That's one word, FINEWOODWORKING, for 10% off your order. Again, that's maverickabrasives.com and the code is FINEWOODWORKING. Have you heard about Festool USA's new cordless tool lineup? Festool packed top shelf performance and value in these tools. The TID18 impact driver and T18 easy drill driver both start at just $199. Festool's cordless line delivers the same power and consistency you'd expect from a corded tool, with the mobility to go wherever the task takes you. Festool tools are always packaged in the company's sustainer organization and storage system. And you know this company stands behind their German-engineered products with a 3-year all-inclusive wear and tear warranty that covers the tool, battery, and charger. For more information, visit festoolusa.com/cordless. So we are here with Dave Fisher, the legend in his legendary shop, not to mention. Welcome, Dave.
Thanks, Ben. Glad to be here.
Dave tried to just wave, and then he remembered it's an audio podcast.
We talked about that, didn't we? And they can't even see Chip here. Then I got my dogs here keeping me company. So
always present.
The shop, yeah.
That's a legendary shop dog right there.
Yeah. Well, this is when you were here, Ben, a few years ago. That was Sam.
Oh, no.
This is the second golden retriever. Yeah. So Sam was a legend, but Sam passed a couple years ago. So this is 1-year-old Chip here. And he's usually out here, prefers to be out here in the shop. So
right on. Well, sorry about Sam.
Yeah, that's okay. He had a good life and we enjoyed him.
So we were just catching up a little bit off air, but you are, a lot of people might not know it. You're a high school teacher, right?
Yeah. This is my finishing up this 28th year here, teaching history, high to 11th graders.
And it's funny, when Jeff and I were there shooting that video with you, I always remember you live in a very small town and everybody knows everybody. Yeah. And we would be out getting lunch or something, and it was always, hey, Mr. Fisher. Hi, Mr. Fisher. And it was like, I taught, and everybody in that town, you either taught them or at times you've taught their kid or their parents.
Oh yeah. Now I'm definitely for years now. I've been on the you had my dad or mom in class kind of a thing. Yeah, I haven't hit you had my grandma or grandpa yet, but I have talked to teachers where they did reach that point.
Oh man.
But no. Well, the other thing is this town my wife Kristen and I both grew up in, so. I either went to school, some of their grandparents just from growing up here. And I know, and of course my family's been in this town for quite a while. So I've taught my own second cousins and my own, actually I have a half brother and half sister that are 28 years younger than me, one of them. And so I taught them and I taught my own kids and, so it's a small town.
One thing that I found funny though is, here, like in the green woodworking world, you're very well known. In the woodworking world, you're very well known. In your town, there were people who didn't know you were a woodworker.
Yeah, right.
And
yeah.
we're having lunch and one day somebody, I heard you're a woodworker, Dave. And I wanted to be like, do you have any idea who's been here the whole time?
Well, it's kind of funny, but it's just not the kind of thing that it's like you got these two different hats you're wearing, and they're like two totally different things, and it's not the thing that I just kind of bring up, Hey, hey, did you know I carve wood too?
Unlike most Greenwood workers.
But, it was interesting when the kids, there started to, I don't know, several years ago, a kid noticed something on YouTube or one of their parents might have said something about me being in fine woodworking or something. And then the kids, what impressed them the most was just like, they have no idea what Fine Woodworking Magazine is or whatever the kids. Yeah. But of course, when they said, well, you have this many views on YouTube, for them, that was, and I hadn't fallen down and hit myself or anything like that. So they were impressed by that. And but what it led to, interestingly, was a few kids, a few of them just thought it was interesting, whatever. But some said, "Oh, I'd like to learn something about that." So here and there, I've had, if they express an interest, I've had some kids into the shop and just kind of introduced into some things, and it's been fun that way, and or just talking to them in class about different options they might have, even in terms of career guidance. I'm not a guidance counselor, but if I see a student who has an interest in, maybe I get the idea that they like to work with their hands a lot and stuff, I kind of, just point out to them that there are other careers out there other than the conventional ones that we all, typically hear about. Well, you can be a teacher, you can be a nurse, you can be a, this or that. And, when I mentioned to them, for example, programs like, the book binding program at North Bennett Street School, and how they've got a waiting list or something, a lot of them just go like, what is that? And there's a lot of people that then, they kind of open their eyes and go, I had no idea. And I like to do that because I think, when I was in school, I really had no idea either. It was just, especially living in a small town, it's just like, well, you're going to go work in the mill, or you're going to do this, or you're going to, it's just a few. It was like you had 5 options, maybe.
Yeah.
I think that gets presented that way to a lot of people. So, yeah. It's a small town, and we enjoy it.
All right, so let's answer some questions.
Okay.
This first one is from one very own Chris Bexford. He was the first one to email you a question.
Yeah, that's incredible.
And Chris is a curious guy. He, like, believe it or not, he's a pretty talented blacksmith. He's always like kind of intrigued by different things. And So he asks, besides spoons and bowls, what other items might one make from green wood? And I'm starting with this not because it's Chris, but because I think it's going to set us up for the conversation to follow. So what are some other things?
Yeah. So, and I appreciate, Chris asking the question. I know he's curious. I had, when we at the Horn 5 Woodworking Live there, I get to sit at dinner with Chris and his wife, and it's a fascinating guy. I mean, his background in ecology and all that is, it's just amazing, his story. But there are so many things. It's like, where to begin, because the one distinction I want to make is when people talk about green woodworking, I think Chip is really wanting to get in on the action. So I think there's a distinction that can be made in green woodworking. In one aspect, you can look at green woodworking as working with wood with very high moisture content. So yes. Question could be like, what can we do by starting with wood with really high moisture content? But on the other hand, I think this is really maybe the way I look at it more so. Green woodworking can be seen as a way to, it can be as opposed to maybe other woodworking, working directly from the natural material. So, even if it's a dried piece of firewood, it's still got the natural, you're just working straight from the branch or the log. And in that regard, you're typically trying to take advantage of the direction of the fibers and the form that's already present in that piece rather than a flat plank of wood that's been. So, in either case, if you're going to, here, get down, Chip. You're going to, one thing that pops into mind is, and I'll just kind of hold it up for those of you that can't see, you got shrink pots. Yeah. I had to start with the shrink pot because although spoons and bowls are fascinating to see, in terms of the moisture content of the wood, it is one thing that you can only make in green woodworking. I could make a spoon or a bowl, for that matter, from absolutely dry wood. It can be an absolutely dry branch or whatever. I could work that. It's just harder to work if it's dry. It's just harder to carve. But a shrink pot, you have a bottom that is dry, and then you have this, you bore the pith out of a branch or a log. So you bore a hole right down through the center of the piece and then hollow it out more with knives and gouges and things. And you make a little groove that would be the equivalent of like the crows in a barrel. But in this case, instead of tightening the various staves around the bottom, in this case, the wood shrinks around the bottom. And so it's just, with the first time you make that shrink pot, it's just such a fascinating thing. The bottom goes in and it's all loose and it's shaking around and almost can fall out. And then the next day you check on it and there's less rattle. And a couple days later, the thing's locked in there. And it's just really, it teaches a lot about wood movement and, that it is this, living thing. And so there's so many things you can do with shrink pots. I've made shrink tubes that are pencil holders that are just long cylinders, and you can make large pots and small pots and lidded and not, it's just fascinating what you can do and the kind of artistic and design possibilities with that. So somebody with, especially with like Chris's design ability and stuff, who knows where that could go.
I remember I think you introduced me to the concept of shrink pots, and you just said shrink pots are magic.
Yeah.
And it really is. Like there are very few projects to like really wrap your head around what's happening with a tree or with wood as it dries out. Yeah. And we were talking in a podcast recently about how spoon carving really, really drives the point of grain direction home for any woodworker, because you're feeling the grain on the knife. Well, a shrink pot really drives wood movement home.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
What happens when it dries. Yeah.
When you consider, the idea when you're working with a bowl or a spoon, the idea that you always split it in half, and get the pith out of there. And a lot of that stems from the fact, that the reason we see these, cracks develop the way they do is because of that differential in wood movement, tangentially and radially. Mm-hmm. So the radial wood movement is only about half as much as the tangential, with the growth ring. So radially, we're talking about from the center of the tree to the bark. That would be like the equivalent of a quarter sawn piece of wood is going to move much less than something that is flat sawn, which would be more tangentially. And so here, when you create a shrink pot, you're left with this this movement is restricted down to only the tangential movement, and the whole thing can just sort of, as it all comes together, it just shrinks and makes a smaller circle, but without cracking, because you don't have the differential anymore. You just have this ring that is free to move inward and outward, so to speak. And there's just something about seeing that happen and experiencing it that you can then apply to everything else. It's like that lesson just sticks a little harder. Yeah. And so even if somebody's making something with a flat board and they're considering how's this going to move and in which way, your mind can kind of go back to that shrink pot and make the connection. Well, how would this be oriented on the rim shrink pot? And, it's just all these little lessons. And like you said, with grain direction in the green woodworking, when you're carving a spoon and it's like, I've got to go downhill this way and I got to switch. And really, you can apply that later on when you're planing a board and you're just you're looking at the grain on the edge and remembering how that works when you're carving. Shrink pots are a fantastic idea. What else did I think about here? Oh, chairs, obviously. I mean, I don't need to into that too much, but of course, all the, many chair makers, whether it's Windsor, Post and Rung, whatever, are starting with green material. Take advantage of the, more moisture content in the posts and, then the rungs going into that are drier. So that's another example of where if you want to use that sort of fitting to your advantage, that sort of joinery, then the moisture content of the wood, the green wood, it can be a major component of that. It's an important part of it. And of course, there's many, many examples of that out there. The other thing that people might not think of as much is just any furniture at all. I mean, furniture. Look at Peter Fulwinsby's work. So the things Peter does is just start with the log and split out that oak, typically oak, but he's worked with all sorts of things, walnut and others. And you're still, I think it's good to remember back in, the past, what we call green woodworking, they just would have called woodworking. It was just, I need to start with this raw material and I'm going to do all the work I can while it's easier to work. And so I'm going to go ahead and, split out these parts, or I'm going to split out the parts for a couple axe handles that I want to make later, but I'm going to shave all that hickory off that I can while it's green. And then I'll have a lot less when it's a lot harder to work. And so you can, and what Peter takes advantage of is, finding really prime logs that are as straight as possible and untwisted, and splitting out those parts, typically radially, to get that nice, in effect, quarter sawn or quarter split stock. And, so this, you can't see it if you're just listening, but behind me, I have just a little toolbox of oak that was all just split out of a green log. And, I even put it together while the wood was still relatively green. I didn't use any moisture meter or check, but because it is quartered, radially split, you're not going to get any cupping. You're not going to get very much movement across the grain. And so you can make, furniture using that. Another person I wanted to mention, you might say, well, yeah, but what if I don't have really straight boards and things? I don't know. The work of Adrian McCurdy, I find fascinating. And so it's interesting, he is, in many respects, using some of the same techniques as Peter. In fact, he's typically working with oak. But he'll just take it, if that wood splits in this curve, because of the grain going that direction, he lets it, he's not going to hew it flat. Yeah. He will use that to his design advantage, and do some incredible things with the curves on these pieces that are just the curves that are present in the grain of the wood. So
there's nothing. A lot of times the word rustic is used in a negative fashion, but there's nothing rustic about Adrian McCurdy's following the curves and allowing the piece to be what it is. It's still a very, it's his work you would easily see in a modern museum,
Oh, absolutely. And he's being very thoughtful about the design, and, it's the same approach. I think, a lot of times, I see what I'm doing is just being like a kid playing with sticks. I just go out when I was a kid and you'd be like, oh, look at that kind of funny shaped stick. And, what can I do with that thing? And that's pretty much exactly what I'm doing a lot of the time now. Now some of the bowls, like, larger, bigger, dough bowl style, things like this, that's just a half a log. But, things like spoons, to get the curves in them, or, a little bird bowl like this, to find that little crook and just try to really think about what curves could be available, what the grain's able to do, and allow that tail to come rising up like that. It's just like a little magical interaction between nature and me. It's just, it's a lot of fun. And, Adrian's able to do the same thing, but, really translate it into furniture pieces. It's fascinating.
So let's go off script here.
Okay.
That bird bowl. So for those who can't see it, it's a bird. I mean, you see a little swallowtail or whatever out the back. If you have the newest issue, this is the back cover is a similar style. Did you just look at a branch and say, oh, I can make this form out of that? Or is it maybe from you taking a branch and just carving away at it unknowingly? Because that's the only way that I can imagine coming up with that shape out of a highly angled crook like that. What is the process like for that?
Well, I think, experience factors in there too. After you've split apart a lot of branches and you've tried some things and you've been able to see what has worked and what hasn't worked, you get to, even before a branch is split, you're able to predict a little bit what is probably going to be possible with a certain piece. But my process is typically I'll find something, it looks interesting. I might not be 100% sure whether that's going to be a spoon or a bird bowl or a wall hook, or, which is another thing you can do with green.
I love doing wall hooks.
Lots of hooks and stuff. When I split it in half is where I first, because there still can be some surprises in there, but when I split that crook and see what that grain is looking like inside and the way it's running, I just, I slow down, and that can be difficult for me to do because your brain's going, 100 miles an hour and you just want to jump right in. But it's good to just set the branch in front of you. Just lay it down and just kind of sit back and look a little bit and think. And usually after a little while, I'll just, see something in there. Now, I don't typically get, well, the branch told me it wanted to be because in reality, what I made this from, I could have made it into a spoon. It's not like it could only have been a bird.
Uh-huh.
It could have been a lot of things. But I just try to see what I think it would be best to become, I guess. I try to, as nature's kind of a design partner for me. And so I try to, let that little piece of wood, try to get the most out of it, try to let it reach whatever its full potential is, I guess, as far as with my limitations for it. And so I just, it's kind of I wish I had a better answer for the process. I look at it and then I just start to, see a shape in the fibers. And, of course you can adjust that a little bit. You don't have to follow them exactly. It all depends on how thin the little portions of the tail or different parts of the design are going to be. But, and then I start in with my, axe, maybe sketch a couple things, and I start removing some wood here and there. And then usually in a few minutes after I start hacking in there, it becomes pretty clear in my mind what this could look like, based on my experience. And, I just keep cutting away, and it takes shape very quickly in that green stage, like the rough sort of, general shape of the thing starts forming. And then there's a lot of work to go after that. I mean, I usually say I use about 10% of my time to remove 90% of the material and about 90% of my time to remove the final 10%. And some surprises come along the way. I might, take a little axe stroke here or there and realize, well, there's something inside of that I didn't anticipate, maybe a little void or brains doing something a little funnier, and I'll change design. And they all don't work out. I mean, I have a couple bird bowls sitting up here right now where they've been sitting there in the dry stage waiting for refinements for months, but I just go, there's something where I go, I just didn't hit that one. There's some where you go, it's just really sweet. And others you go, I probably should have made this decision a little bit differently, and you learn from it. And I try to really evaluate what was it that didn't work. That's a really important question for me. Why does this one not please me as much as this one? What is it about the lines? And I'll try to make I really think the sketching is a valuable thing in terms of that design process. Not making necessarily beautiful, pictures. We're not talking about that. We're just talking about let your brain open up a little bit on some paper and think about curves and which ones, why is it that the combination of this curve with that curve is nice and why isn't it? So Yeah, I don't know if that answered.
No, it's
the process.
It's totally interesting because I think when I started off carving spoons, I was constantly going for that quintessential Swedish spoon design. And
Yeah.
I don't think I hit it once. Dozens of spoons later, it always wound up taking a turn. And eventually I just decided, okay, I don't have the eye to make it happen or whatever. And eventually I started carving things that I liked but were not anything at all like what I set out to do. So it's interesting to me that you, even for you, you can't force the thing.
No,
you can't make it happen. You can't sit there and say, okay, today I have a commission for a bird bowl. I'm going to do this one. They kind of have to come as they come.
Right. And I have some it varies. There are some things, like I said, with the, like a dough bowl or something is typically a half a log. So now I still have the variations there. Like, so if somebody said I'd like a dough bowl like that one, well, I know, let's say I have a log with roughly those same dimensions and, length. I still have to take into account things like what the growth ring patterns are in that log. Are they concentric or are they off to one side? That can totally the look and the way the piece will move. But then other pieces, so there are certain bird bowls I do from like a quarter log. I'll take a quarter log and put the split surface, sort of like a rooftop, directly upward. Mm-hmm. And in that case, that's a pretty standard. I'm starting with a pretty standard blank, in other words. But in other pieces, it is much more dependent even on the actual flow of the fibers. And, it's the same thing with spoons and so on. For this, serving spoon here, I'm taking, when I split that out, I'm totally going with the way the fibers are going, with the way the handle's going to be in relation to the angle from the bowl to the handle. But then I'm adjusting things as I go, depending on that particular piece of wood, the way I feel, the strength of the fibers. I might even, the strength of the wood. It can even be the same species. There are some, for example, I could have two pieces of cherry, but I can tell that this tree, for whatever reason, is not as tough. It's not as strong. So I might leave things a little bit thicker, or it might make the other one a little bit thinner. Or just a little twist in the fibers might inspire me to say, oh, I want to put a facet along this edge here because of the way those fibers are rolling through there. Mm-hmm. So I think the simple answer is just this constant interaction between the material and the fibers. I think that's probably true in all sorts of woodworking. I mean, when James Krenov was designing a piece of furniture, he might have been working with a dry plank, but he's taking into those same considerations. Mm-hmm. But you really, when you're talking about working with something that's going to be in service, like a spoon, you're trying to really think about the strength and the fibers and things like that. So it's just this little back and forth, and it's just a lot of fun, and it takes a lot of the pressure off of me, to be honest with you. I never have this feeling like, I know some artists and stuff who get that blank paper, or writers, the blank paper. It's like, what do? I can do anything. There's too many possibilities. And in this case, the creativity within those limits, I find really fascinating. And I love to do that. It's just like, look, I've been given this piece. I've got to do something with this piece of wood. What can this piece of wood be? This is my limitations, but also the opportunity. So that's what I love about it. Yeah.
That's interesting. I think Michael Fortune has talked about how constraints of a piece that's commissioned, it needs to be this size, it needs to fit there or whatever, that helps him. Because otherwise it's this, I can wander wherever and wind up not going anywhere, so those constraints are handed to you by nature as opposed to by a sofa table for this whatever. Yeah. Interesting. All right, so cool. We went off grid there. Let's see. So let's answer a question. This one is like the age-old Greenwood working question. We have two variations of it. One from Ron and one from Gail. Ron asks, I've done a bunch of woodworking, mostly with power tools and home center lumber. How would I explore green woodworking? How does one acquire green wood? Yeah, I know, go in a forest and cut down a tree, but seriously, I don't live out in the country with property. How can anyone explore with green wood? And then Gail asks, very specifically, where do I find green wood in Brooklyn? I'm specifically looking for, this is where it goes a little different. I'm specifically looking for enough raw material to make a Jenny Alexander designed shaving horse. So this is interesting. Let's talk overall about Greenwood. Dave Fisher does not live on 10 acres in the middle of nowhere. You live right off of Main Street.
Right. Yeah, I live in a residential neighborhood. It's just sidewalks and little blocks and lots of houses and stuff. An old neighborhood, but still, I can't go and harvest a tree in my backyard. But there are lots of little wood lots around me, and I know lots of people that own land and things like that, and trees are just everywhere. But it can be a challenge depending on where people live. I have some friends in Arizona and stuff that I've sent some blanks out to once in a while, because there are limitations. And historically, is somebody lived in Arizona, native peoples they just wouldn't have used the same materials as people that live, where I do. But of course, that doesn't mean there aren't ways to go about it. So in terms of where to get green wood in general, I would say no matter where you are, if you're in an area where there are trees and you just don't have any access in your own backyard or whatever, talk to some landowners, listen for the chainsaws. The one great thing is the tree cutting companies. Listen for the chainsaw. Usually if somebody's got a chainsaw running, they most of the time don't even want whatever they're cutting up. They're trying to get rid of it. So go and talk to that person. Don't be afraid to ask. Don't be shy. Look in the yellow pages and look at the arborists and the tree companies. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit delicate there. These guys have a job to do. I mean, so for somebody, you don't want to be standing under the bucket truck as they're in the middle of the job and saying, mind if I have that piece? But if you talk to them ahead of time and just ask them, maybe a lot of these guys, they have areas where they just dump their excess wood. I mean, they have so much wood, many of them don't even have time to even turn it into firewood. They just, there's some of the tree companies around here where just at the edge of a woodlot, they just dump the stuff and it's there. And so you might find that out even from your municipality, where they go and trim trees from the town or whatever, from the city. They might have a spot where they just dump these things. And if you explain what you do, they might let you just have access to that spot. Another possibility, is if you, sometimes I know around here, they'll trim the trees at the edge of the roads, especially. Mm-hmm. And when they do it, they'll come along. They just, like the power company will just go they're assigned to this one road for that week or whatever. And all along the side of the roads, there's nothing but branches and stuff laying there. And it's up to the property owners to get rid of the wood. It's just their wood. They just leave it there. Our company doesn't even take it. So I'm sure that differs depending on where you are. But there are times like that where if you stop and see the homeowner and say, and they go like, please, that's all. If you have apple, apple growing area or fruit growing area or whatever, there's in a lot of, even if you live in an area where there isn't a lot of natural growth of trees like this, a lot of ornamentals that are planted in people's yards and stuff. So be opportunistic. There's all that kind of thing. If you're in Brooklyn, for example, those are the kind of things that I would guess would be the best approach in Brooklyn.
When we were at Greenwood Fest a few years ago, I remember meeting more than a few woodworkers who live in Manhattan or, the Bronx or, I was like, you're a green woodworker. How does that happen? And apparently, I have a chicken in my shop right now. You have your dog.
I have a sleeping dog. Yeah.
My chicken has wandered in and was playing in the jointer shavings. I hope it was playing in the jointer shavings. But apparently there was a section of Central Park that the tree trimmings get dropped in, and it's like if you go there on Sunday afternoon or whatever on the third, there's always piles, and you can just go there and grab it and leave. So yeah, maybe talk to the parks department if you're especially in Brooklyn. There's reasonable parks around there, they might have
and a little, a little carved spoon gift on the that's running the truck or whatever. I mean, who knows? It's just like, hey, here's what I'm doing, and some kind words, go a long way. The other thing is, if you're really stuck, and I've mailed some blanks. And I know the class I did with Elia Bazari, he was mailing blanks to people. That is an option. You can talk to somebody if you know somebody that lives in an area, and you can explain what you're looking for. You can do the shipping. I mean, of course, the trick is the weight. I mean, it's pretty heavy, and so the shipping can be costly, but it's not too bad. I just shipped a blank. I don't know. I think the overall weight was something like 15 pounds, and shipped it from Pennsylvania to southern Georgia or something for I don't know, $30 or something. So,
I mean, spoons you'd be able to get in the one rate.
Oh yeah, Well, and the thing is, if you know somebody, if they can split it out, if they have enough knowledge to get rid of some of the bulk, and they can just kind of split out blanks instead of all the waste wood, if you can, instead of just sending them a log, if you can split out the log and turn it into at least a rough blank, and save some things there. But what I was going to say is you can carve bowls, you can carve spoons from dry wood. Now, you might have to limit your designs in terms of if you're not working straight from branches and things like that. In terms of a bowl, if somebody wanted to start out with, I just want to make a bowl, you could start out with, let's say you can get your hands on a 4x8 chunk of basswood, that's 16, 18 inches long or something like that. Then you can do my exact procedure, really. You can just pretend it's a, piece of the log. I mean, it's you can do the same thing. Now, if you try to do that with like just a dry piece of cherry or something, you're going to have, it's going to be a very different experience, because it's going to be really tough to slam into that dry cherry with an adze all the time or whatever. But you can, work with some pieces until you get something more ideal. There's always a way. And that kind of brings up the question about the wanting to make the shave horse. So what I would recommend there if you wanted to make that shave horse from, and this is the Jenny Alexander style shave horse, which for those who aren't familiar with Jenny's plans for that, there you go. That's the
make
you got the original book there.
I do.
Wow, nice.
I got it before it really hiked up on eBay.
Yeah. So there are plans at greenwoodworking.com, which is Jenny's site that is still up and running. And that's, I have that same shave horse. So that's what I remember, I was just like totally diving into that site. And I thought, well, look, this is a great horse. I can make that. All I need is a plank. So I started with I had a friend who had some timber sawn, and he had some elm sawn. It didn't have to be elm, but it was like a 2x6 real dimension 2x6 plank of elm, and maybe 7-8 feet long or something. And that pretty much gave me everything. I mean, I the legs from some branch wood that I split out and used that. But if you wanted to make it truly from a log and start with absolute logwood, it'd be a challenge. You'd have to have a log that's pretty straight, unless you wanted to really hew it out completely. So I would recommend for building that shave horse, get a plank. And that's pretty much the way Jenny does it, right?
Yeah, she actually said in the book that my shaving horse is made from scrap hardwood lumber.
Yeah.
White oak is excellent, but almost any wood will do.
Yeah.
Of course, you can split the parts out of Greenwood, she says.
Yeah. There you go. I agree 100%. So you just find a plank, and if you aren't able to find around you maybe a local sawyer or a lumber dealer that has sort of a hardwood plank in that dimension, go to the home center, get a 2x6. Ideally, if they carry yellow pine, if they carry southern yellow pine, a lot of times that's what treated wood is. But it'd be nice if you didn't go with the treated wood. But a lumber yard near us that's not there anymore, but they used to build a lot of trusses, and they had a stockpile of untreated southern yellow pine for their trusses. And so I could go and get a lot of great material that way. Like I could get a 2x6 whitewood, or which be standard spruce, pine, fir, whatever, or I could get southern yellow pine, which is much stronger.
Yeah.
So you can go buy a 2x8 or a 2x6 of southern yellow pine, stick some legs in it. The plank will be for your the riser and also the bench itself. And you can still take advantage of, if you want to do, sort of the green woodworking methods. If you want to split the legs out of some branch stock, all you would need to find would be, a 18-inch length or whatever, 24-inch length or something of some green wood. And you could split that out and shave the legs down and go ahead and do the tapered tenons and mortises and things like that, as in Jenny's book. You might, if you want it to be a little bit thicker where the legs go in, if you're only able to get 1.5 inch stock, it'd probably work fine. But if you wanted it to be a little bit thicker, you could always just double up the plank at the areas where the legs are going in from underneath.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. And that's where I would recommend. That's the most reasonable thing. Yeah.
Awesome. This episode is brought to you by Shaper Tools, makers of the Shaper Origin, the handheld CNC router that brings digital precision to the craft of woodworking. Tackle joinery, cabinetry, hardware installation, and more with speed and precision. Try it risk-free in your shop for 30 days. Visit shapertools.com to learn more. We have another age-old green woodworking question, especially now that it's heating up a little bit. From Leonard. I have a question on greenwood storage. My workshop is not climate control, So in winter, it's really cold, 0 Celsius. We all know, everyone can translate that one, right? Okay.
Should be 32, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And in summer, it is plus 30 Celsius, 86 degrees Fahrenheit.
Thanks for that one. Yeah. Okay.
I have taken Dave's advice on wrapping in black plastic bags, but in the warm weather, the wood still dries out. Am I better to keep it wrapped and store it outside all year round under a shelter? Also, could a thick wax be applied to suitably treat the end grain on a log to prevent it drying while still in a log form? Okay, so we've got the extremes here, and maybe let's try and cover both. We want to keep Greenwood fresh, and but there is concerns that come up from making Greenwood go moldy if you get it wrong too, right?
Okay, so we'll handle temperature first. All right. So the only thing in terms of keeping moisture in the wood, the temperature really doesn't matter in terms of we want to keep it green so it's still easy to work when I get to this thing. Okay. And I want to keep it uncracked. So there's two things about keeping the moisture in the wood right there. Number one, I want it to be easier to work. Number two, I don't want a pre-cracked blank. All right. So if I let the thing dry out, if I try to dry, if I tried to dry the half log that this bowl came from, I can't without it cracking. Now I can get all this material out of it and get that mass out of there, and now it can dry without cracking. But there is no way I could dry that half log and not have it crack. I don't care how slow you want to try it, anything else. It's not going to work. So I want to keep the moisture in until I can let it dry without cracking. Number two, I want it to be easier to work. So the temperature really doesn't affect me keeping the moisture in there. I can do that in various ways. But like you said, Ben, the thing is you're going to end up with a science experiment. If the temperature is warm and you combine that with the moisture in the wood, you can really, get some, well, first of all, the wood will start to decay. I mean, in a sense, what we're doing here, once the tree has been cut, the decay process has started in one form or another. It's just like a piece of fruit now that's sitting on your shelf that was on. I often think about it like in terms of an apple or something. If you pick an apple off the tree and it might not be quite ripe, it's almost too crisp and so on. And then if you set it there, it'll kind of mellow and get a little nicer to bite and taste and so on. Well, wood kind of does the same thing. It'll start to actually mellow out. In fact, it can be good to let it age a little bit. In my experience, it becomes a little less brash sometimes, given that particular, all else being equal for that particular piece of wood. And it will kind of mellow out. It's almost like it is ripening, and in essence, I suppose ripening is rotting and it's on the way, and so, it's almost like you'd say, well, this apple's just at the right point of rotting, and so this log, if it is a decay resistant species, I've left pieces of cherry logs in bags or sealed up otherwise or whatever in warm weather or whatever. That heartwood is not going to decay. I've been around for a couple of years. So if you have walnut or cherry, white oak, stuff like that, even red oak, the heartwood is very decay resistant. The sapwood will start to go on you after a while. And the sapwood, that's another reason to potentially let it be around a little while, especially with walnut and cherry. There's that very distinct contrast between the heartwood and the sapwood. Mm-hmm. But if you leave it set around a while, I don't know if it's a leaching of the minerals or whatever's going on, but the color of the sapwood will stop being quite as white and obvious. The contrast will be toned down a little bit. If you plan on using the sapwood. Now, if you wanted to use the sapwood in something like where you're wanting the most, if you need something like chair building or something that you don't want any decay, work way in. But anyway, in terms of the temperature, then it's only a matter, especially if you're working with woods, that if you have maple or any other, typically the lighter woods aren't very decay resistant. So if you had some aspen, if you had some maple, if you had some basswood logs, any of those kind of things, they can discolor pretty quickly. They'll start birch, correct. Yeah. So all those things, you want to try to keep them cold because it'll keep the mold from growing, keep things from decaying. So what I typically do when I get a log, regardless of what species, I will take that log. If it's still whole with the bark intact, I paint the ends with two really heavy coats of whatever extra latex paint we have around from the bedroom that's never going to be repainted or whatever, So we'll just stick those coats on the ends. So then essentially what I've done is I've got keeping the moisture in around the log, and then the paint on the ends is keeping the moisture in. And I'll just keep them in the shade outside and leave it like that.
Now, how long are you keeping the log?
If it's a species like cherry or something that's decay resistant, when you're saying long in terms of time, or length. Yeah. So in terms of length, I need it to be at least 6 inches longer than I want the final piece to be. Okay. Now, sometimes I don't have the final piece in mind, and that just determines if I have a 20-inch log out there, well, I'm going to cut a couple inches off both ends, and then I go, that's how long that bowl is going to be. That's what I do. So I keep it as long as possible. If I could pick an 8-foot log out of the truck and set it down, I would use an 8-foot log. Okay. As long as possible. Now that brings up the next thing that I might do other than that, and leave it. Now, when I'm ready to make something out of that log, I might get, depending on how big the log is or whatever, I might be getting 2 pieces, 3 pieces, 4 pieces out of it when it's all said and done, whatever I'm making. And so I'll go ahead and, cut the ends off. And so I can see the grain again, read the grain, decide where I want to split the thing open, along the pith down the middle. And if I'm using, if it's let's say I'm just getting 2 logs out of this piece and splitting it in half and getting a log out of each, or getting a bowl out of each half rather. I'm going to go and take the one half into the shop and start working with it. The other half at that point, I can't really just leave it there because now I've exposed this whole half to air and so on. So then I'll put it in a plastic bag. And, it doesn't have to be a black plastic bag. Actually, clear plastic bags that they make for like putting recyclables in some municipalities and stuff, you can just get clear garbage bags. Mm-hmm. Those are really nice because it's a lot easier to remember what in the world you have in there. There are many times you take a little peek in all these bags and it's always a surprise. But the clear ones can be nice. It doesn't really matter. But if you seal up that bag, there's no moisture getting in or out, and you can keep something in there for a long time. If you are concerned about it getting decayed or too much mold on it. If it does get a little bit of that mold on the outside, it just, shave it right off and leave it outside and then bring it in. But if you're concerned about that, depending on the, I try to break it down into small pieces I can. So I do this with spoon blanks all the time, for example. Instead of trying to store spoonwood, like a lot of my spoonwood, I'm a walk in the woods or whatever, and I'll see like, hey, this tree just came down in a storm or whatever, and I'll see like a couple crooks in the branches that are now on the ground, and I'll take a couple crooks, put them in my pack. And I don't want to I'm not going to bring home extra length that I'm carrying. So I'll take those crooks as soon as I get home. I don't store them like in the branches. I go ahead and split out the blanks, because right then I might realize, well, this thing's no good. And now I'm not going to store it. So, and I just find out right then. And if I split it out and go, okay, and I might even axe it out a little bit, ideally. And it just real quick, 5-10 minutes worth, just to get some of the bulk off. And I might then take 7 or 8 of those things, bag them up, and really seal it up, and then put them in the freezer. Yeah. Put them, if you don't have room in the freezer and you're going to get to them in a few weeks, just put them, your wife might not notice that they're down in the crisper drawer or whatever, so put them down there. That basically keeps all the moisture in, but also keeps any bacteria from growing because of the cold. Those are my typical procedures. I'll start with painting the ends. And if that's not working, or I want to make sure the blank's already split, if somebody's already cut this up into firewood length pieces in a yard, and I know I'm not going to have room to cut anything off of this, or I'm not going to have anything useful, then just get it in a bag, because they don't even get many end checks. It's just going to really stay in there. And if you're going to put it in a bag, you can go ahead and split it in half and see what the thing is, if it's even worth it, if there's any surprises inside, does it look good? And then you can just put it back in the bag.
Okay. So let's say you have roughed out a bowl.
Yeah.
And then life gets in the way and you have to like go to work or something and do things.
Yeah. Yeah.
How are you storing it in between processes? Cause you don't sit down and start a bowl and finish a bowl in one sitting, right?
No. I mean, if I have an entire day, there are many bowls that if I go from morning till supper time or something, I can do all the green part on some bowls. And in that case, I just keep on working. But even if I break for, when I break for lunch, not if I break for lunch, I break for lunch. But even if I need a break for an hour, I put it in a bag, going in a bag. It's amazing how quickly now, especially if I'm working outside and there's a little bit of a breeze. And so, I mean, it'll go fast. You can have a crack on that surface. So what we're talking about is that differential. If you still have some thick areas in that bowl, that surface is drying so quickly, especially if there's a little bit of breeze or sun or whatever. That surface is drying so quickly, but the middle portion that isn't exposed is still full of moisture. And it's that differential that's going to create those cracks. So I keep it in a bag anytime. The only time it doesn't go in a bag between sessions is when I've got it down to essentially it's like this bowl. Keep reaching for this one. But anyway, this bowl, if you would have seen it in its the stage when I stopped the green stage, it would have looked essentially like this. I mean, I've really concentrated over the years, like even under here, the shaping under the handles and all that kind of stuff, that's happening while it's green. And there's 2 reasons. Number one, it increases my success rate for drawing. Okay. Mm-hmm. If you haven't had any, the number one reason I get cracking, which rarely happens now, but when it does, is because I didn't notice a check in the blank ahead of time. If I get this down thin enough and get that wood out of there, it's going to lose the moisture evenly and dry just fine. But the other reason is it's just a heck of a lot easier to remove the green wood at that stage. And it's easy to not be honest with yourself and go like, well, we'll just see when it dries. And then you go like, no, there's no question that's going to have to come out of there. So why not do it now when it's a lot easier? Because I know a lot of guys that, they'll tell me like, well, I've got 20 bowls done with the green stage. They're just sitting there waiting to do the finishing stage, but that's not as fun. It's not, that wood, when it's going, it really flies off of there, and you've got, but it's, then you have to also make those final design decisions, and so the way I look at it is go ahead and make some of those design decisions when it's green. Just go ahead and decide. You're going to have to decide at that point anyway. And then you're going to have so much less material to remove when it's much harder to remove. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, that's probably about all the time we have. We're gonna have to do this.
Too long. I was too long-winded on the first one. That was the problem.
No. And then I had us go off script. Dave, this is what people want. They want the deep dives.
Okay.
They want like I swear, when we try and fit too many questions in and we just gloss over stuff, then we get the follow-ups, and then we get people, oh, well, you didn't cover this. And no, we're going to get it. And there will be follow-ups, I'm sure. And there's stuff that we didn't cover, and we'll do it again when school's out. We'll do this again.
Yeah. Whenever you're ready. This is fun. Yeah.
Well, that does it for this episode of Shop Talk Live. Thank you again to Dave Fisher for hanging out with us. Just a quick note, we're going to be doing more of these one-on-one interviews. They're a great way for us to reach out to a more diverse group of woodworkers, cover different types of woodworking, and just get outside of our bubble a little bit more. We really want to reach out to more people and bring more woodworking perspectives to you, the listeners of Shop Talk Live. That doesn't mean that the normal format is totally going away, but likely about half of the shows from here on out will be one-on-one interviews, and we're pretty excited about just telling more stories here on the show. All right, well, that does it for this episode of Shop Talk Live. If you have any questions or comments, please send them in to shoptalk@taunton.com. And if you're watching on YouTube, click that thumbs up button. It helps. And we'll see you in 2 weeks with another episode. Thanks for listening.
If you love this podcast, you'll love Fine Woodworking Unlimited. Access more than 40 years of articles, how-to videos, and project plans designed to take your craft to the next level. Check it out.
The chicken was not just playing in the shavings.